Welcome to Airspeed Altitude. My name's Daniel. Today we're going to talk about ways that you can save money on your flight training and in the process become a more engaged, but ultimately a safer, more confident pilot while navigating the skies. But first, before we get into that, why should you listen to me? I'm just some dude on YouTube. Well, let me tell you a little bit about my background. I'm one of those guys that I was passionate about aviation since I was a little kid. But about 25 years ago, I got the opportunity to take my first flight lesson, and it just completely stoked the flames of passion I had for aviation, and I knew I wanted to be the best pilot I could be ever since then. So 24 years ago, I obtained my private pilot certificate, and I just kept growing. I've been a flight instructor for over 17 years. I've got an ATP as well as a CFI, an instrument instructor certificate, and a multi-engine instructor certificate. I just love aviation. I've been lucky enough to teach at a local college in their aviation department. I did that for over 7 years. And I've also had the opportunity to flight instruct for 2 different test pilot schools here in California. That's just a little bit about my end of it and what makes me excited about it. But in all that time, for 25 years, I've also been a student of aviation. And I continue to grow my own skill set every opportunity I get. While developing this list of things that I do myself, and I've also seen my students who are extremely successful do, and also see the students that struggle, what they neglect to do, no matter how much I prompt them and coach them. I also reached out to a number of different flight instructors that I knew that they were professional flight instructors. They love their craft. And I said, hey, give me the highlights of what you see your successful students do. In all this, we developed a list. They're in no particular order, but I hope that you find them engaging. If you think I missed something, please put it down in the comments section. We're all still learning, we're all still growing, and I want to see every one of you that want to become a pilot. I want to see every one of you grow and become successful at that. I want to share the skies with you. So without further ado, let's get started. Take ownership of your training. What do I mean by that? Well, one of the first things is, other than being engaged, you need to show up on time. As a flight instructor, you would be surprised at how many times somebody wants to show up a half an hour late to a 2-hour appointment. All that does is just ruin their opportunity to get the most out of that flight. The other thing is, when you show up, be prepared. Show up more prepared to make the most out of that flight. And that also leads into ask questions. So one of my friends told me recently, he said, you know, Daniel, it's the one question that I didn't ask that I usually have to find out the hard way. I have to learn the hard lesson because of it. And we were relating this to flying some more advanced aircraft and stuff like that. But it's true in a lot of places in life, and it really is true in your flight training, because one of the problems that we have is, I as a flight instructor coaching you along, I want to see you do well, but sometimes you're not ready for the information I have for you. But at the same time, you're going, well, I know Daniel told me this, or I know that, my flight instructor said this, or maybe you just didn't even hear it, but you think you're supposed to know it. There's a funny thing that happens in the brain. Things won't stick in your head until you're ready to receive it. In fact, we call it the law of readiness when it comes to flight training or flight instruction. When you have to take your fundamentals instructor, you learn all these things. But if you don't ask the questions, us as flight instructors don't get a really good chance to get into your head and figure out what you do understand and what you don't understand. So not only are you helping yourself by asking questions, you're also helping us help you. In the taking ownership of your training, if you find yourself with an instructor that isn't receptive to you asking questions, find a new flight instructor. We have seen things on the news lately of some instructors that are out there that shouldn't be out there flight instructing. So this is your training. This is your life. You are developing a skill that's going to keep you alive out there by yourself. And even more so, taking your friends and family. So if you're finding yourself in a situation that you're flying with somebody that you don't gel with, that you don't feel free to ask questions to, that you feel isn't there to help you succeed, I guarantee you there is a flight instructor out there that will help you accelerate and excel in your flight training. Take good notes. Doesn't everybody take notes when you're learning a new skill or what have you? You'd be surprised, most people don't. And it takes a little prompting from the instructor. It's often overlooked by the students, and unfortunately it's often overlooked by the flight instructors. When I'm studying, I take detailed notes of everything that I think is important for the next flight, and I bring those in with me because all too often as I'm studying, I'm preparing for the next lesson, the next flight, I'm starting to come up with questions in my head that are good, relevant questions that otherwise are going to get missed. So just like any good flight starts off with good pre-flight preparation, in your flight training, your pre-flight preparation starts at home in your studying. Once you get into that, in the flight, your flight typically breaks up into 3 phases. You have your before flight ground, which I think is a bad name for it. I refer to it as a pre-flight briefing. If you didn't study beforehand, then it's ground school. But if you studied and you're prepared, then we're going to brief on what we're going to do. And we're going to go through those notes and we're going to figure out what you might be lacking. And we're going to put that into motion so that we can develop our flight, plan our actions and our flow of how the flight's going to go. Then we're going to go out and we're going to fly our plan. And in that flight, we're going to go through all those items that we talked about on the ground, and we're going to get you in the area that you can build skills and build understanding. Then we're going to come home and we're going to land and we're going to get out and we're going to do a post-flight brief, or a debrief. And in this area, we can take the knowledge you studied and then actually seeing it in action. And with the right questions, we can solve what might be lacking in your head. And one of the ways to do that is to take notes of every one of those maneuvers. After we did it before we took off, now we're going to go and we're going to break down each one of those maneuvers we did and explain to the instructor what you did. In that point in time, it gets revealed like, hey, you didn't understand this piece, but we can fill that in. And now when you go home and you're thinking about this and you're reviewing those notes, you're more prepared for the next time that you go out and do that maneuver or that task. And then along with that, once you get into the debriefing phase, you also want to ask questions of, so what's our plan for the next flight? What's plan A? What's plan B? And if there may be a possibility for plan C, let's have that out there too, because you want to show up to that next flight as prepared as possible, ready to go, because doggone it, I hate to admit it, but this stuff is expensive. And even more so, your time in the airplane is extremely valuable, and your time with the flight instructor. So when you get to your check ride and you're getting for check ride prep, if you took good notes along the way, along the process, you have something that you understand where you were coming from, that you can go back and study and prepare you for doing those maneuvers in the check ride. So it's a win-win all the way around, and it doesn't cost any extra than what you're already doing. Chair flying. Now, as I explain this, you might look at me and go, Daniel, that's a little bit weird. That's a little bit odd. I don't know if I can do that. But I'm going to tell you, it is one of the best things you can do to accelerate your training and also make you more comfortable and confident in the airplane. And in the end, it's going to save you a ton of money. So what is chair flying? Chair flying is basically just sitting down, visualizing yourself in the cockpit, performing the tasks that you have learned. So what do? I get home from a lesson. I get home from a flight that I've learned a lot of new things. Or maybe I don't even get home from it. I set myself in the car. I've got my notes sitting right there, and I visualize myself in the cockpit of that airplane, and I go through the tasks step by step and really sink it in as deep as I can into my brain. You go, gosh, that seems awfully hokey. Well, I'm going to tell you, some of the best pilots in the world, you'll see them do this before their flight. And how do I know that? Go to an air show. Go out and watch the acro pilots. Half an hour before they get in the airplane, you'll see them doing their hand gestures and walking themselves around. And what they're doing is they're visualizing themselves in their airplane, performing the maneuvers they have to maneuver and getting themselves in the right mind space to perform low altitude aerobatics. So if it's good enough for those guys, doggone it, it's good enough for me. I learned this early on in my flight training, and I credit this to part of the reason why I was able to get done with my private pilot certificate with just a little over 40 hours. I was one of those folks that I couldn't afford to fly very often. I was working, 40, 50 hours to get 1 hour of flight time in. And this really accelerated it because though I wasn't flying as often as I would like to fly, in my mind, I was in the cockpit every day working through this. One of the other things that I did a lot when I was learning how to fly and I was growing as a pilot is when I was commuting to and from work. I would sit there in the car and I'd turn the radio off and I would have two-way radio communication with air traffic control to myself. And I would just go through the whole lesson, the whole flight. Okay, I'm going to pick up ATIS, and ATIS today is this, and I expect this is the way that they're going to, the ATIS transmission is going to be. And then I'm going to call ground, and I'm going to call ground. I'm going to tell them who I am, where I am, what I want to do. And then from there, I go out and I do my run-up. I'm going to get through all that stuff, and then I'm going to pull up to the hold short line, and I'm going to call tower, and I'm going to tell them this is what I want to do. These are the possible things I think they might read back to me. And then I'm going to read them back to them. Take off, climb out. Okay, I'm going to call approach. This is how I'm going to talk to approach. This is how I expect them to talk back to me. And these are the options through that. And I'll tell you what, just those little things, and again, doesn't cost you anything. When I haven't flown an airplane in a while, and a lot of times I'll get into an airplane, maybe a single seat airplane, there's no way to get training on it. I work through this process, and it gives just absolute dividends and results. Be wise on how you spend your money. All too often, I see brand new students, before they've got hour 1 or hour 2 in their logbook, they're out there and they've got the latest, greatest $250 a year annual subscription to an electronic logbook, or a $1,200 to $1,500 headset, and they've got all this stuff. They go out and they buy just random things that really they don't need to have at this point in time. They need to figure out first getting their medical done, getting their knowledge test done, and honestly, just getting in the airplane. Case in point, the headset. Yes, it's really nice to have a noise-canceling headset. But instead of buying that $1,200 headset when you start, what about buying either a used good headset online or buying a brand new good non-noise canceling headset? Because at the end of the day, you're going to get your pilot certificate, and then you're going to go take your friends out flying, and you're going to need an extra headset. So that headset that you bought initially, well, yeah, hand it to them while they're flying. They won't know any different, and you're going to have an extra headset. Believe me, having an extra headset is a good thing. In fact, if you watch those videos, you'll see most of the time I'm wearing this green headset that I've had, and I've actually been using since I was a student pilot. That $200 headset at the time has been so timeless that it's outlasted my really expensive noise canceling headsets. And it's not a dig on the noise canceling headsets. I'm getting ready to buy a new really nice headset. I've also got my ATP, and I've also got a lot of experience in flying, so it's a good investment. I know I'm going to be using it for a long time, but when you're getting started in flying, though you want the latest, greatest, coolest whiz-bang thing, take that money, that hard-earned money of yours, and point it in the direction that's going to bring you the most amount of success. When it comes to the airplane you fly, you want a good, solid, safe airplane. And you're going to learn a lot out of a 152. And if the 152 is in your budget and something you can do, there is benefits to flying that 152 versus that Piper product or that 172 or that Cirrus. So don't feel like just because you can't afford the biggest, best, coolest trainer out there that you're going to be less of a pilot, because each airplane brings its own benefits and its own drawbacks. I personally, if I've got a brand new private pilot student, I would rather have them in a low-tech aircraft that makes them develop good core pilot skills, and it's easy to grow into that really nice whiz-bang cockpit with all the glass in it and stuff like that. All that glass airplanes were all designed for people who flew the more legacy aircraft to grow into. So do what you can afford and make that work for you. again, I'm a guy that when I was learning how to fly, I couldn't fly as often as I wanted to. I did this and I've had an amazing career just being able to pay 1 hour at a time along the way and grown exponentially because of it. So again, don't feel like you're less of a pilot if you don't go out and buy all the stuff right away. In fact, you're smarter and wiser to buy the things in a timely manner as you can use them. Because if you go out and buy that $250 a year subscription to that electronic flight bag, but you haven't used it for the first month or two of your flight training, well, that subscription is just going to come due 2 months earlier than you needed to pay for it in the first place. And you could have taken that money and put it towards your skill set. So again, I'm not deterring you from doing the things that make you happy, but if you want to save some money in aviation and you want to grow your skill set, these are just ways that you're not cutting corners at all to navigate you forward. Practice as often as you can. What I mean by that isn't go out and fly it 5 times a week and be super ace of the airport. It's actually quite the opposite. Fly as often as you can handle, that you can afford, or you can find the time to do. All too often, I hear folks say, yeah, I really want to learn how to fly, but gosh, I went to a flight school and they told me I had to fly 3 times a week, or, and I just don't have that budget. I can fly once a week, maybe once every other week. I just can't commit that much time. I can't commit that much money, whatever it may be. Well, I'm going to tell you, as a professional flight instructor, as somebody who has owned a flight school, and somebody who learned how to fly and has grown in aviation with limited resources, it is entirely possible to fly on a limited budget and a limited amount of free time. Most of my students in the past were folks that could come out once a week, and they still were doing the national average or better. By doing a lot of the things I've told you to do so far, I applied those to my flight training when I was a young student pilot, and I was somebody, I had no money, I had no access to aviation. I just kept applying all these things and just kept studying, getting prepared. And I was only able to fly, once a week if I was lucky, once every 10 days, once every 2 weeks. I could barely afford to put gas in my car and get to the airport. Doesn't matter, I still got there. So don't let anybody hold you back. Don't listen to these naysayers that say you have to have a bunch of money in your bank account. You'll find your own pathway. Now, what I've done in the past with my students are they can't afford to do things. Well, we're going to work with their budget and we're going to give them a plan. And sometimes that plan would be, hey, instead of coming out here for the next 2 weeks, I want you to take that money and you're going to get yourself a nice flight simulator, and we're going to get you the things to make this so it's as normal as possible. And then I'll give them homework on each flight. Go out and fly the simulator. We're going to do these things. You're going to do these things in between the times you see me. I find that that's extremely successful. It really brings them up. And also, the chair flying stuff. All these things help with making that budget come down, making it more affordable, making you more comfortable and confident in it. Because the worst thing in the world would be you get there, ripe old age of 106, and you look back on your life and go, gosh, I had a really great life, but I really wish I would have learned how to fly. I really wish I would have taken a flight lesson. I can't tell you how many people I know that life has gotten in their way and they didn't experience something they really wanted to experience. And I see it a lot whenever I take people up for airplane rides, when I'm flying at one of the museums I fly for, and you just see that glimmer of light and you go, gosh, but you can do it. I know you can do it. So hopefully that one wasn't too far down in the weeds, but I really want you to be out there with me in the aviation world. And I can't wait to see you out there flying an airplane. So that brings us to our last subject, and that is to stay ahead of the requirements. Great, awesome, but what are the requirements? Well, there's not a whole lot of requirements that you have to really worry about to stay ahead. And I really think of these more of milestones. The first milestone that you might find as a restriction is your aviation medical. You want to get your third class medical, and get your student pilot certificate. What I would recommend is you talk to your local flight school or flight instructors and you find out who do they recommend as an AME or aviation medical examiner. From there, find out if you're really worried about your medical, if you say, hey, I take these medications, what have you, find out if that AME is willing to do a consult with you to find out whether or not you qualify before you get in and start taking all the exams. So the earlier you can do that, gives you peace of mind, and it's not going to be a restriction because you have to have that medical and you have to have that student pilot certificate in most cases to solo an airplane. So get it out of the way. Get it out of the way as early as possible. The next big milestone is your knowledge exam. All too often I see pilots, I have pilots that are coming up, they're getting ready for their check ride and they're holding off on it because they need to get their knowledge test done. Well, they don't have enough time to study for their knowledge test and their oral exam and get ready for the practical test. So they're just, in a holding pattern. And at the same time, because you're sitting there waiting for all this stuff to get done, you still have to maintain your skill level. So you're out there burning up time and money with the flight school airplane and your flight instructor, just maintaining proficiency to take your check ride. I love it when I have a student that they get their knowledge test done before they solo. Because once you solo, you're now a pilot. You can fly an airplane by yourself. And that means that the next phases of your flight training can happen pretty quickly. And if you got that knowledge test done, there's a lot of things in that knowledge test that are going to prime you. You'll have a little bit more knowledge for the things that you're going to have to learn when it comes to navigation and night flight and all those other things that you're going to be working on in the soon future. So get that thing done as early as possible. And in today's day and age, there's so much accessibility to ground schools via Zoom or an online ground school that you can take at your own pace. It's really, everything's at your fingertips. So take advantage of it, get engaged, make that happen. The next area that often gets overlooked or not understood or not properly communicated to students is have you get a hold of a oral exam guide, go online, buy one, and then get a copy of the Airman Certification Standards, or ACS, for the level of rating that you seek. The ACS is really easy. You can do a search, Private Pilot Airman Certification Standards, and it's going to come up as a PDF. You print that PDF out, have it in your little notebook, and it's got everything you need to know about what is going to be tested on you for the flight maneuvers. So when you're doing slow flight, what does the ACS actually say in there, and what is the criteria? Me personally, when I was learning how to fly, we used to call them the practical test standards, but I'd take those numbers and I would cut them in half. That way, if I had to hold plus or minus 200 feet of altitude, I was taught, cut it in half, set yourself up at 100, plus or minus 100 feet of altitude. That way, if you get distracted for a moment, you're still within the boundaries. But at least now you have good data. Now, the oral exam guide, that is a lot of the questions and where to find the answers for them that you're going to be asked during the oral exam for your check ride. While you're going through the phases of your training, you can also consult that oral exam guide and find out what are the things that you're going to have to explain to somebody you've never met on a day that you're probably a little bit nervous about meeting this person because they've got the fate of your flying world in their hands. Get yourself prepared. Get yourself to the point where, gosh, this is just a communicate. I'm just talking to another pilot, and I'm reassuring them that I understand the things that they need to know I understand, so I can go out there and fly safely. These are just really easy things, but they're super often overlooked. At the end of the day, I want you to have a great time in your flight training. I want you to grow as a pilot. I want you to be safe out there. And I can't wait to the day that I see you out there at Oshkosh and you landed on that green dot and we bump into each other as we're walking to go get a corn dog or something. And you tell me about, hey, yeah, I got to do this. If this was helpful to you, please hit a like and also please subscribe for us. It just lets us know that you're enjoying this, lets YouTube know that you're enjoying this, and hopefully other people will get to see this. And even more importantly, if there's something that you see that we missed or we can get a little better on, please put it down in the comment section. I'd really like this to be an open discussion that helps other pilots out there grow in their skill set.